So it seems that I'm kind of slightly continuing a theme today of animals, of beginning my sermon with a reference to animals. So I heard a beautiful story the other day from Rabbi David Wolpe, who told the story of the lion walking around the jungle and saying to each animal that he came across, "Who is the king of the jungle and who do you love best?" Obviously, he tried it on small gazelles and other animals that shied away from him and said yes immediately. The leopard said yes. The gazelle said yes. Even the tiny baby zebra said yes to him. And then he asked the same question to the elephant. The elephant trod on the lion, kicked him under a bush, tore off his tail, and the lion said to him, "You don't have to be angry just because you don't know the right answer." Sometimes we mistake love when it is offered to us. Od lo ahavti dai was Nomi Shomer's song, love song for the young Israel, written in the early 60s. It talks of wind on one's face and the wilderness being tamed, towns growing and children being raised all in this new land. And the refrain is, Od lo ahavti dai, I haven't loved you enough yet. It's a beautiful song, and it's often the first tune for those beginning Israeli dancing. The words are both about the land that we hold dear, but also for me today, because the idea of not loving enough feels so opposite for Yom Kippur, whereas the writer, poet Philip Larkin wrote in his poem Church Going, someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious. And so they do, so we do, as we gather together on Yom Kippur and perhaps think about love in our lives. When we pause to look at how far we've drifted from where we want to be, before we rush back to how things were before this wonderful moment enshrined in our year of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, before we return to life as normal, we are still thinking, how could we do things differently? How could we choose life in a different way? When things feel wrong as they have done of late, can we read her words, Od lo ahavti dai, as words of warning for us? How much of what is wrong in our own personal lives, as well as the society at large, is because of a lack of love? Love guides us. Love of our family, our sense of ourselves, the Jewish identity we have inherited or chosen, who we love in the world, and even how we love in this congregation, which is, if we're honest, a microcosm of the world. All of that is motivated by love. All of that is love. We know it never stays the same love. It must grow to expand to new situations. It asks questions. It's curious. It knows that people don't stay the same. Heraclitus famously said, it's impossible to step into the same river twice. And maybe that's the same about love, because love changes. If you want to see something differently, take the walk you took yesterday, said John Burroughs, the naturalist. We are called upon as Jews to love God, not just as in the Shema, but rather the chesed, the loving kindness, the compassion that infuse the universe and this service in particular, and our experience of God as loving. El Rachum v'Chanun v'Rav Chesed v'Emet, God who is merciful, gracious, endlessly loving and full of truth. Or Avinu Malkeinu, loving parent, beloved ruler. Martin Buber, the philosopher, said the way we engage or think about God is predicated on how we engage relationally with people. So I challenge all of us this day. I'm not quite calling heaven and earth as a witness. I don't have that degree of authority, but I challenge us today. Od lo ahavti dai. Who and what have we not loved enough? Maybe it's ourselves. Maybe we've fallen into too easy a habit to berate ourselves, to critique, to be unkind, to be unloving. Take good care of your soul, for she is turquoise and agate, is the anonymous prayer that we have at the beginning of Sidor Lev Chadash. Our soul deserves love. Or perhaps we don't investigate ourselves enough. Our habits, our accustomed beliefs. Do we no longer notice the superiority we bring to situations? Do we sell ourselves short by not challenging ourselves enough or not loving ourselves enough? Od lo ahavti dai. Maybe it's in our family, looking back at our antecedents, those who've inspired and influenced us. Do we tell them how they've marked us, how our paths reflect theirs, and what they told us or showed us bearing out in our everyday living? There's a Talmudic expression, Ma'aseh avot siman b'chaim. The actions of our ancestors are a sign for our own lives. Do we show that appreciation? As Rabbi Lionel Blue, Zichrono Livracha, wrote, being Jewish means you have the grace to take this heritage, make the best you can of it, and offer love. Do we share that gratitude? Od lo ahavti dai. The crossness, the loving word unsaid with those we live with or amongst. Do we withhold love or limit it? Do we tie love to specifics of what people do for us? Do we take it for granted? Do we withhold and restrict? For the sin of not loving enough will say, Od lo ahavti dai. Are there things we are not saying that could bring affection and understanding into our lives and those of whom we love? Could we heal rifts and misunderstandings? Deceptions and hurt in a family can go on in endless cycles with parents and children, partners and friends. Did we cheat others from feeling as loved and accepted as they deserved? As our Mahzor will remind us later today, I confess the times I have been unable to love enough. Od lo ahavti dai. Maybe in our community, Al tifros min hatzibor, wrote Hillel over 2,000 years ago. Maybe you have felt disconnected and distanced from being outside our walls of our synagogue. How could we not have these past 6 months? More than a building, we describe our synagogue, but how much we miss greeting each other in our sanctuary, waiting for the challah and the lilted tones of us all singing Kiddush together. Remember that? Of course, we've withdrawn physically, but maybe we've also withdrawn a little love. Maybe the folk that have come up to be the next generation of leaders are new and unfamiliar to our stalwart and long-standing members. Maybe we might have pulled away a little because of that, or not shown enough love to those who are becoming leaders of our congregation. Or maybe you're a newer member and you don't know well enough the long-standing ones who built our community and contributed so much. Maybe you benefit from their love and energy and vision when you book your child's B'nai Mitzvah, when you join our religion school, when you come to a Shabbat service. Maybe you could show more love and appreciation. Od lo ahavti dai. Maybe my, at times, ambitious gestures to include, extend, and celebrate those who've been previously excluded has confused and alienated at times, like a Pride Shabbat. I want you to know I do so because every day of my life I note the words of Psalm 118 written with such prescience. Even amas habonim hayata l'rosh pina. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Those who were rejected or overlooked by their sexuality or identity are now recognized and included in the heart of our Jewish community. Od lo ahavti dai. Maybe we haven't yet loved enough. Have we loved Klal Yisrael, the people of Israel, enough? Have we watched carefully and observed how our Jewish identity has grown and expanded in our lifetimes? How our notion of who is a Jew, from our own at times limited backgrounds, is no longer large enough to embrace all those who are part of our people. I know how much I have learned these past few months. We have listened soberly, and I shared our position paper. I shared what we've been doing on Facebook last night, that we have listened soberly to the realization as we gathered as a group to think about being a Jew of color in our congregation. We listened soberly to the realization that even our loving and welcoming congregation has work to do to honor and include those who look different from us. I have recognized that we may have thought that we were being strong allies to our brothers and sisters of color. And this summer, many of us, I most of all, have recognized I haven't done enough. Od lo ahavti dai. Do we worry that there isn't enough love to protect the Jewish people and our concerns, as well and at the same time as other minority groups that suffer? Do we withhold love and compassion when we feel defensive? Od lo ahavti dai. There is room for all. My support for much of the work of Black Lives Matter does not mean that we support the small minority of activists who perpetrate violence or who peddle hatred towards Jews. Rather, it comes from a profound respect for those who focus on what we as humans share, a profound desire for humanity and a parity in how the world treats us, regardless of skin color or background. How can I, as a Jew, as a rabbi, ignore the power of B'Tselem Elohim? In the image of God, humanity was created, and that means every single one of us. Love can be personal, but it can also be public. As Professor Cornel West wrote, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. And it's true. Valerie Kaur's book, See No Stranger, arrived on my doorstep over the summer from one of my congregants, and I literally inhaled her words. A Sikh woman, she writes about the anger and violence after 9/11 expressed to Americans who look different, especially Sikhs in turbans. This takes her down a path of understanding what love can be and do as a revolutionary force for understanding. She uses love to articulate struggle for justice and empathy, and in so doing offers a new vision for living in a mixed and diverse world, where we might respond with interest and love rather than with suspicion and indifference to those around us. The heart, she teaches, is a muscle, which the more used, the more it works better. You are part of me that I do not know yet, she insists to her reader. Do we allow our own fear to block love and empathy? Do we understandably withdraw from politics because it's too distressing, because we feel powerless to add anything to it or ameliorate what's happening? Yet to be alive is to be engaged. To choose life so we and our children will live a long life is to exercise that muscle of our heart. Jews take sides, they do. They look for justice and good behavior, and they amplify and reinforce it. Look at our audacious prophets. Od lo ahavti dai. We may not have loved enough in this area of concern for the world around us. Maybe we haven't, but it is never too late. It truly is never too late to begin. And that is the beauty of this gift of Yom Kippur, that we still have time. Rabbi Israel Salanter, the founder of the Mussar movement, told a magnificent and nuanced tale about the shoemaker working late into the night. For many years, I didn't fully understand this story. I saw it just as hard work and diligence, but then I understood. Rabbi Salanter teaches us that the shoemaker never ceases to mend what can be repaired. He goes home late at night from his prayers and he sees that the shoemaker is still working with his candle lit deep into the night. The shoemaker doesn't stop whilst there are shoes to mend. And so for us, we can do the work and the transformation needed on ourselves, in our own families, in our congregation, our synagogue, and in the wider world, which we play an important role within. If we open ourselves to it, Patach Libi, our prayer at the end of the tefillah begs us, open my heart. And that's what this moment is for, not for self-flagellation or plain regret at what we failed this past year. As Catherine Mansfield, one of my favorite writers, suggests, regret is surely a colossal waste of time. Rather, our task now, and it is never too late for this task, is to open our hearts, transform a little, and love a little more, so that we start with ourselves, our family, our community, and outwards to all. In the Torah portion of Vayera, the one that we read on Rosh Hashanah, just before Abraham is given that terrible task, Abraham welcomes guests. He says to them, "Let me fetch you a morsel of bread." But instead, he makes them a sumptuous meal, killing a lamb and laying on what must have taken hours and hours. Rabbi Elazar said, "From this we learn that good people promise little and deliver much. Let's promise less and offer more. We can manage more justice, more mending, more kindness, and more love. So od lo ahavti dai, I haven't yet loved enough, will become enough. Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshianu. Deal with us kindly, our beloved parent and sovereign. Deal with us kindly with love and with fairness, and let us literally improve lives, our own and others, through compassion, generosity, and love. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Amen.